I almost said no. It had been a long week, and honestly, I was looking forward to a quiet Saturday. Maybe staying in, catching up on laundry, eating leftovers straight from the container. But when my best friend, Mason, burst into my apartment that morning like he owned the place, his excitement was hard to ignore. "Come on, it's just a barbecue," he said, already raiding my fridge. "My family throws it every summer. It's low-key, tons of food. Some people swim, my uncle grills like a pro. You'll love it." I raised an eyebrow. "Do I even know your family like that?" "They're harmless," he said with a grin. "Besides, the lake house is beautiful this time of year. You've been living like a hermit. You need sun, and meat, and maybe even a tan." I rolled my eyes but eventually caved. That's Mason's gift. He has this way of dragging me out of my own head and into something messier and better. By early afternoon, we were pulling into a gravel driveway that opened up to a sprawling lakefront property. It wasn't showy, but it had charm. Wooden deck, hammocks between trees, boats tied up at the dock. I could already hear the sounds of laughter, distant music, and the unmistakable sizzle of something cooking. The air smelled like grilled chicken, sunscreen, and lake water. Kids ran barefoot across the yard. Adults lounged with paper plates and solo cups. It had the chaotic, sun-drenched joy of a family gathering in full swing. I followed Mason toward the back of the house, trying not to feel awkward. I didn't know anyone here. A few people waved politely. Others gave me that quick glance people do when they're trying to place a stranger at a family function. "This is the guest," Mason called out like he was presenting me to royalty. "Be nice. He doesn't know any of you yet." A few chuckles. Someone handed me a beer. I muttered thanks and tried to relax. And then I saw him. He stood at the far end of the deck, one hand resting on a pair of grilling tongs, the other gripping a beer bottle by the neck. He looked older than the rest, maybe late 30s, early 40s, tall, broad-shouldered, with a kind of quiet confidence that made him feel like the center of gravity in the whole yard. He was wearing a plain charcoal gray t-shirt, jeans, and sunglasses. Nothing flashy, but there was something about the way he stood, still and observant, while everyone else moved in waves of chaos around him. For a second, I thought he was looking at me. I quickly looked away, pretending to be interested in the plate of watermelon someone just walked by with. "Who's that?" I asked Mason, trying to sound casual. He followed my gaze and smirked. "Oh, that's my Uncle Drew." "Uncle?" I blinked. "He doesn't look old enough to be someone's uncle. He's like the cool, mysterious family member," Mason said. "Never married. Travels a lot. Shows up when he wants. Grills like it's a religion. And yeah, he's cool. Just intense sometimes." I turned back toward the grill, but he was gone. I scanned the crowd. Some cousins were starting a volleyball game. 2 kids were chasing a dog near the dock. Mason was already halfway through his second beer. I was still standing there with my unopened bottle, wondering why my palms were a little too warm. I told myself I wasn't thinking about him again, that it was just a look, passing glance. The kind that happens at a party when you don't know anyone and you're scanning the crowd. I was mid-sip when I felt it. That sensation. You know the one, when someone's watching you, and you're not sure if you should turn around or pretend you don't notice. I turned anyway, and there he was, walking toward me, steady, measured, confident, and something in my stomach did a small, uncertain flip. I swallowed hard, barely managing to place my bottle down without fumbling it. And then, out of nowhere, he walked straight toward me. He didn't say anything at first, just nodded at me as he stepped closer, his sunglasses now tucked into the collar of his shirt, eyes sharp and clear. Hazel, maybe? Hard to tell in the sunlight, but they had that kind of quiet intensity that made you want to look away, and then immediately look back. "You holding up okay?" he asked, nodding toward my drink. His voice was low, smooth, like he didn't raise it unless he had to. "Yeah," I said quickly. "Good. Everyone's really nice." He half smiled. "You sound surprised." I shrugged, suddenly aware of how stiff I was standing. "I don't usually crash other people's family events." "You didn't crash," he said. You were invited. Big difference. He gestured toward the grill. Come keep me company. Unless you've got a better offer. I followed without thinking. The deck boards were warm under my feet as we made our way to the far end of the patio, where the grill smoked gently in the shade of a faded umbrella. He handed me a pair of tongs like it was some sacred rite of passage. Flip those burgers. Carefully. I judge people by their grill skills. I chuckled nervously and did as told. So, what happens if I mess it up? You get banned from future barbecues. And I take it personally. I flipped a patty too soon. It stuck to the grate. He leaned over my shoulder, just close enough for me to feel the warmth of him. Slow down, he murmured. Let the heat do the work. I wasn't sure if we were still talking about burgers. There was a silence. Not uncomfortable, but thick with something else. I kept my eyes on the grill, aware of every inch between us. The scent of smoke, meat, and something else, cologne maybe, mixed in the air. You're not from around here, are you? He asked. City, I said. Couple hours out. He nodded. Figures. Got that look. What look? His eyes flicked over me, slow and unapologetic. Like you know where the good coffee is. And don't trust people who smile too much. I laughed, startled by the accuracy. Not far off. He took the tongs back from me and turned the rest of the burgers with practiced ease. His forearms flexed as he moved. Tan skin, a few scars, veins that told stories of real work. He didn't speak for a moment, and I didn't either. Finally, he said, You and Mason close? Yeah, college roommates. Been stuck with each other ever since. He nodded again like he was filing that away somewhere. He talks about you. I tilted my head. Anything good? He glanced at me, the corner of his mouth twitching. Mostly. Said you're quiet. Smart. Can't cook for shit. Wow. Exposed. And, he added, that you don't let people in easily. That one caught me off guard. I guess that's true, I admitted. Hard to find people worth letting in. He looked at me then, really looked. Not in a creepy way. Just like he saw more than I'd offered. I get that, he said softly. More than you know. Something fluttered low in my chest, and I hated how obvious it probably looked on my face. You always this intense with your guests? I asked, trying to lighten it. He smirked. Only the ones who look like they're about to bolt. I raised a brow. Do I look like that? He stepped just a little closer, leaning in with that same unreadable smile. Relax, he said, voice dropping just enough to send a chill up my spine. I'm not gonna bite. Unless you ask. And there it was. The line. Teasing? Flirting? A weird joke? I opened my mouth to reply, but nothing came out. He turned back to the grill like he hadn't just lit a fire in the middle of a family gathering. I watched the smoke curl up into the summer air, trying to decide if I was reading too much into it, or not enough. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't sure which possibility scared me more. The sun dipped behind the tree-line, turning the lake into a sheet of melting gold. Laughter echoed from the house. Someone had turned the music up, and a group of cousins was splashing around by the water's edge. The smell of charcoal still hung in the air, mixed with citronella and sweet, sticky barbecue sauce. I needed a minute. I slipped away quietly, walking down the worn wooden path that led to the dock. My sneakers thudded softly against the planks as I reached the end and sat, letting my legs dangle over the edge. The lake was calm now, little ripples lapping at the supports below. I could see fireflies blinking along the shore, their rhythm soothing in a way the party never could be. I don't know how long I was alone. Long enough to let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Then the footsteps came, slow, deliberate. I didn't turn. You always disappear like this? His voice was quieter now, less teasing than earlier. He sat beside me with 2 drinks in hand, one of which he passed over without asking. I like the quiet, I said. People wear me out sometimes. He nodded. Yeah, same. We sat in silence for a while, just the soft hum of bugs in the grass, the occasional shout from the backyard, and the distant splash of someone doing a cannonball. This was always my favorite part of the property, he said eventually. My brother, Mason's dad, he'd run around like a maniac, always organizing volleyball games or setting off fireworks. Me? I'd sneak down here with a beer and a book and pretend I wasn't part of the circus. I smiled at that. So you were the black sheep? He chuckled, low and honest. Not black, just different colors, I guess. I took a sip of my drink. It was stronger than I expected, and I welcomed the burn. Guess I relate to that, I said quietly. He turned slightly, his shoulder brushing mine. Yeah. I nodded. I've always felt a little sideways in my own life. Not quite where people expect me to be. Not quite what they expect me to be. He hummed.
Sounds familiar.
I looked over at him, trying to read whatever was behind that calm exterior. He was still in that plain t-shirt, his hair a little messy from the breeze. There was something incredibly grounding about him, like the world could spin out but he'd stay exactly where he was. You always seem so sure of yourself, I said, before I could stop myself. His gaze dropped to the lake. That's the trick, isn't it? Look calm. Be calm, even if you're not. We sat in another stretch of silence. Not uncomfortable, just full. Then, lightly, without looking at me, he said, They've always seen me as the one who never settled down. The one with stories. The cool uncle, sure, but only because they don't ask questions they don't want honest answers to. Something about the way he said it made my throat tighten. Do they know? I asked carefully. Some of them suspect, he said. Most pretend not to. It's easier that way. I looked down at the space between us, which suddenly felt smaller. I'm sorry, I said. Not sure what I was apologizing for. For the world. For the way people are. For how I could relate. He shook his head. Don't be. I stopped waiting for people to give me permission to be myself a long time ago. We sat there, feet skimming just above the surface of the lake, drink bottles sweating in the humid air. Then his hand. It brushed against mine. Not an accident. Not quite a move either. Just there. His fingers lightly touched mine. A soft, almost imperceptible pressure. Not asking. Not pushing. Just existing in that tiny, electric space between hesitation and hope. Then, just as gently, he pulled his hand back. I didn't breathe for a second. I looked at him, but he wasn't looking at me. He was staring out at the water like nothing had happened. But something had. Even in the silence, the current between us had shifted. I could feel it in the space where his hand had been. I should go, I said finally, voice low, but I didn't move. Neither did he. I barely slept. Not from noise or discomfort, but from replaying every second on that dock. The words, the touch, the silence that said more than either of us dared to. By the time morning came, the lake house was already buzzing again. Kids were chasing each other barefoot through the dew-damp grass. Someone was slicing watermelon on the back patio, and the grill had come back to life with a hiss and a puff of smoke. It was hot again, the kind of summer heat that makes everything feel heavy. My shirt clung to me within minutes, and even my sunglasses felt too close to my skin. But the worst heat wasn't the weather. It was him, Drew. Every time I looked up, he was there. Not obvious, never close enough to be suspicious, but always within sight. Carrying a tray of marinated steaks to the grill. Fixing the lid on the cooler. Handing a drink to someone with that quiet, unreadable smile. And every once in a while, his eyes would meet mine. Just for a second. Just long enough to pull the breath out of my lungs. Mason, of course, noticed nothing. He was too busy organizing a game of water volleyball with his cousins and trying to get me to join. I declined, blaming the heat, but really it was the nerves. I couldn't focus. I couldn't even think straight. I needed space. Inside the house, the kitchen was mercifully cool, the air conditioning a sudden relief as I stepped through the sliding doors. I poured myself some iced tea and leaned on the counter, letting the glass sweat against my palm. I heard the door behind me slide shut. I didn't have to turn around. I knew it was him. He didn't speak right away. Just moved past me toward the fridge, close enough that I felt the shift in the air, the whisper of his shirt brushing against mine. He opened the door, grabbed something, then stood still. "You're quiet today," he said, not looking at me. "Trying to survive the heat," I said, my voice low. He chuckled once, quietly. "It's not the sun you're worried about." I turned to face him. His body was angled slightly toward me now, arms relaxed but jaw tense. His fingers tightened around the can he'd just pulled from the fridge. The room felt smaller. The sound of the party outside faded to a distant hum. "You didn't sleep either," I said, not a question. "No," he said. "Didn't help that the doc's been replaying in my head all night. We were close, too close, and yet no one would have called it inappropriate. Two adults, just talking. But if anyone walked in, if Mason walked in, the silence between us stretched tight." He stepped toward the counter. I stepped back, but only a little. He leaned in, not touching, but close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him. His voice dropped, just above a whisper. "This is probably a bad idea." I swallowed, heart racing. "Then why does it feel right?" He looked at me, then really looked, and something in him flickered, like he was fighting the part of himself that wanted to lean in, to kiss me, to break every rule we were both pretending existed. His jaw clenched. He took a breath like he was about to speak, but didn't. Instead, he stepped back. Just one step, but it felt like 1,000 miles. His eyes lingered on mine for a moment longer, then dropped to the floor. He turned toward the door, hand resting on the handle. I stood there, still leaning on the counter, my heart hammering against my ribs. He didn't say anything else. He just walked out, and I stood there, completely breathless. The house was quiet. Not the quiet of an empty place, but the kind that settles in after a long day of sun, noise, and too much food. The laughter had faded into whispers, and then into silence. The last firework had gone off hours ago. Everyone had disappeared into bedrooms, pull-out couches, and sleeping bags scattered across the floor. Everyone but me. I lay awake on the living room couch, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun lazily overhead. The blankets were thin, but it wasn't the temperature that kept me tossing. It was the weight of everything unspoken, everything undone. The tension from earlier still clung to my skin, stubborn and electric. I needed water, not for thirst, just something to do, something quiet. I tiptoed through the hallway, careful not to wake Mason or his younger cousins piled in sleeping bags nearby. The kitchen glowed faintly from the nightlight near the sink, just enough to make out shapes in the dark. I didn't mean to look down the hallway, but I did, and that's when I saw it. A sliver of warm light spilling from under the guest room door. It was the only door still lit. I stared at it for longer than I should have. Frozen, glass of water forgotten in my hand. I could have walked away. I could have gone back to the couch and pretended none of this had happened. Pretended that yesterday was just a weird, heat-induced fluke. That the doc didn't mean anything. That the kitchen hadn't happened. But I didn't, because the door wasn't locked. I moved quietly, like the floor might betray me. My hand hovered just above the doorknob for a second. Then the door creaked open slowly, but not from my side. He opened it. He stood there, backlit by the warm glow of the bedside lamp.
No shirt.
Just flannel pajama pants sitting low on his hips. His hair was tousled like he'd run his hands through it 100 times. And his eyes, they were calm, not surprised, like he'd been waiting. He didn't speak. Neither did I. He stepped aside, just a little. I stepped in. He shut the door behind me. Click. For a long moment we just stood there, inches apart, not touching. I heard the hum of the ceiling fan, the soft creak of the wooden floor beneath us. My own heartbeat, too loud in my chest. Then, slowly, his hand lifted. He cupped the back of my neck. His touch was gentle, not possessive, not demanding. Just there, anchoring me. His thumb brushed against the curve of my jaw like he was memorizing it. I closed my eyes. I didn't know how long we stood like that. Minutes, hours, a blink, a lifetime. Eventually, I found myself sitting beside him on the edge of the bed. His leg pressed lightly against mine, the kind of contact that felt both casual and utterly consuming. We didn't talk. We didn't need to. Nothing about that night was loud.
No declarations. No dramatic confessions.
Just quiet presence. His hand in mine. My head resting lightly on his shoulder for a moment I didn't want to end. When I returned to the couch later, maybe an hour, maybe longer, the house was still asleep. And I lay there, eyes wide open, staring into the darkness. Not restless from guilt, not filled with shame, just full. And for the first time in a long time, that fullness didn't scare me. By the time I woke up, he was gone. The house was buzzing again. Coffee brewing, kids running around with syrup-sticky fingers, adults in mismatched pajamas scrambling for Advil. I blinked against the morning light filtering through the blinds and pulled the thin blanket tighter across my chest. The spot on the couch still smelled like smoke from the night before. I sat up slowly, rubbed the back of my neck, and tried to steady myself. For what, I didn't know. But I had the feeling something had shifted overnight, and I wasn't sure where I stood inside of it. "Morning, lover boy," Mason called out from the kitchen, his voice too loud for this early. "You disappeared last night." I froze for a second, then forced a casual tone. "Just needed air." Mason poured cereal into a bowl. "Air, huh? Pretty sure you were gone for more than a breath." I shrugged. Didn't realize I had a curfew. He grinned and let it go, distracted by a cousin spilling orange juice on the table. I grabbed a coffee mug mostly to have something to do with my hands, scanning the room as casually as I could. Drew wasn't there. No sign of him on the back deck. No towel draped over a chair. No trace of that quiet presence he always seemed to carry. I checked the hallway on my way to the bathroom. The guest room door was wide open. Sheets folded. Pillows fluffed. Gone. No note. No text. No sound. Just gone. The rest of the day felt muted. I helped Mason clean up, dodged conversations with his chatty aunts, and laughed when expected. But every laugh felt 2 seconds delayed, like my body was going through the motions while my mind stayed somewhere else. In that room, in that moment, in the silence that had followed everything. I didn't ask where Drew had gone. I didn't have to. I could feel the answer in the empty space he left behind. The ride home was quiet. Mason played a podcast I wasn't listening to and talked about his upcoming work schedule. I nodded when appropriate, giving short answers and trying not to check my phone too often. I didn't know what I was waiting for. An apology? A goodbye? A warning not to tell anyone? Maybe nothing. Maybe that's exactly what it was, nothing. The days that followed didn't help. I replayed it all on loop, not just the night but the way he looked at me, the way his hand lingered, the way he'd touched the back of my neck like he knew it was the only part of me I couldn't hide. Was it a mistake? A fluke? Was I just convenient? I told myself to stop thinking about it. But I didn't. I checked my phone more than I'd admit to anyone. Opened apps just to close them. Watched for a notification that didn't come. Until one night, just after midnight, my phone buzzed once. Unknown number. Be safe. And remember, I noticed you. That was it. No name. No follow-up. No read receipt. Just 12 words that knocked the air out of me. I stared at the message for a long time. Reread it until the words blurred. He noticed me. Not just saw me. Noticed me. And maybe that was the scariest part. Not that he left without a word, but that for a few hours, someone had seen me completely. And I wasn't sure if I'd ever feel that again. City noise had a way of swallowing you up. Cars honking at nothing. Strangers brushing past with earbuds in and eyes down. The scent of roasted coffee beans tangled with exhaust fumes and sidewalk heat. It was a rhythm I'd grown used to, one that used to comfort me. But now it just felt like a distraction. I hadn't talked to Mason about Drew. I told myself it was to protect things, our friendship, Drew's privacy, my own sanity. But if I was honest, it was more because I didn't know what to say. What was I supposed to call that night? That weekend? That moment? I hadn't replied to the text either. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't trust what I'd say if I did. Instead, I got good at pretending again. Pretending I didn't check my phone when I woke up. Pretending the warmth I'd felt that night on the dock hadn't stayed with me like a secret pressed under my skin. Pretending it was just a summer thing, heat, tension, hormones. temporary. Then came the cafe. It was small, a corner place I liked because the music was low, the staff never rushed you, and the windows let in just the right amount of afternoon light. I went there sometimes to read, sometimes to think. That day I wasn't reading or thinking, just stirring coffee I hadn't touched, zoning out while rain tapped at the window. And then a voice, low, familiar, still pretending not to think about me? I looked up so fast I almost knocked over the cup. He stood there, damp from the rain but composed, as always. A dark green jacket over a navy tee, his hair longer than before, beard trimmed, eyes steady, calmer maybe, grounded. "Hi," I managed. He smiled softly and nodded toward the seat across from me. "May I?" I nodded. He sat down, not rushing, not avoiding, just being there. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We just let the rain do the talking. "I wasn't sure you'd text," I said finally. "I wasn't sure I should," he replied. "But I couldn't leave it like that." I nodded slowly. "You left early." "I did. Without saying goodbye." He sighed. I panicked. Thought I was being selfish. Thought maybe you'd regret it. Maybe I would. But the second I pulled out of that driveway, he looked at me. I knew I'd made the wrong call. I leaned back, trying to keep my voice steady. "So what is this? An apology?" "No," he said. "This is a second chance. If you still want it." I blinked. "You think we can just pick up where we left off?" He shook his head. "I don't think we left off. I think we paused." He paused, fingers tracing the rim of his mug. "I've spent a long time being the guy who doesn't stay. The guy people think is charming, distant, unattached. But the truth is, I was afraid of being seen, of getting close, of wanting something I might not get to keep." His voice lowered. "But then I met you, and suddenly not wanting was no longer an option. The air between us changed, like it had back at the grill, on the dock, in that small, quiet room." He continued, "I'm not asking for everything. I'm not asking you to know what this is yet. I'm just asking if you want to walk beside me, for now, see where it goes." I didn't answer right away. I looked at him, really looked, at the man who had quietly, without permission, carved out a space in my life I hadn't known was empty. And in that moment I didn't feel scared. I felt seen. "I was never pretending not to think about you," I said quietly. "I was just afraid you'd forget about me." He shook his head. "Not a chance." We didn't kiss. Not in the middle of that cafe. Not with the barista watching from behind the counter. But we didn't have to. There was something solid in the silence between us. Something warmer than any firework. Stronger than a stolen glance across a backyard. Maybe it started at a barbecue. But this could be the real fire. Have you ever felt something real when you least expected it? Tell me. Would you have stepped inside that room too? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with someone who believes in unexpected love.